WCBU's On Deck delivers everything you need to know to start your day. You'll hear Greater Peoria's biggest stories of the day, headlines, and today's public meetings and events, all in 7.5 minutes. Listen to On Deck from WCBU, part of the NPR network.
The witnesses of the EF4 tornado that touched down in Washington on November 17, 2013, aren't likely to ever forget it.
It looked like a bomb zone.
But post-storm unity left its mark, too. You'll hear those stories and more on today's All Things Peoria. Good afternoon, I'm Jody Holtz. On today's special episode of All Things Peoria, WCBU takes a look back at the tornadic storms that scarred Washington, East Peoria, and Pekin 10 years ago today.
Sometimes it feels like it just happened, and other times I can't believe it even happened at all.
It also exacted an emotional toll that can't be measured, but a true sense of community spirit sprang from the storm's aftermath, too.
The resilience of this community is just amazing because how quickly they began to rebuild.
These stories plus local news just ahead. This is WCBU's All Things Peoria on 89.9 FM in WCBU.org. Broadcasting from the campus of Bradley University, this is WCBU's news magazine, All Things Peoria, and I'm Jody Holtz. I'm here today with a special episode on the 10th anniversary of the November 17th, 2013 tornadoes. The unseasonably warm temperatures and eerie dark skies of November 17th, 2013 were two of the warning signs of incoming severe weather. Jim Angel was the Illinois state climatologist at the time. He says the storm that produced the destructive tornadoes that touched down in Washington and other cities around the state was very well forecasted. But he tells WCBU's Cameron Cudanello that nobody knew exactly what was going to happen.
The National Weather Service has this, what they call a Storm Prediction Center out of Norman, Oklahoma, and they put outlooks out to 3 days of, whether you're in some kind of risk for severe weather. And they really saw the potential for this to develop into something serious, just because we had extremely mild and very warm, very humid conditions across Illinois. And then we had this strong cold front that was going to push through, and all those factors coming together put us in a especially high risk. And I would say, and if you lived in Illinois for any period of time, you know that November is typically not when you see tornadoes. That's kind of an odd case to have that many tornadoes in November. So, it's much more of a spring-like setup as far as that goes. But they saw that coming. So the National Weather Service was well prepared ahead of time for this event, and emergency management, obviously, as well. Probably the general public, maybe a little less so because they're not weather nerds, so they watch this stuff out 3 days ahead. But I think that certainly helped a little bit to have this forewarning.
This storm, just how out of the ordinary was it?
Yeah, so that's very unusual to have a tornado in November. It is statistically possible for us to have a tornado in any month of the year. We get them all 12 months of the year in Illinois. They're just much more rare in this time of year. In fact, that outbreak, there was about 25 in total across the state, and that literally doubled the number of November tornadoes since 1950. So that shows you how unusual that event was, that it not only was that it occurred, but that so many of them occurred during that time of year. So, yeah, it felt very much more like I said, more like a March, April, May type of event than it did a November event.
And was the severity of the tornadoes also something that, surprised you? I think it 14 out of 25 were EF2 or higher.
Yeah, so that's another thing. Many of our tornadoes in Illinois are fortunately fairly weak. The most common is the EF0s, and the next most common is EF1. So the 2s and the 3s are fairly rare, and the 4s are exceptionally rare, and the EF5s, the infamous ones, are extremely rare, which is fortunate because those are the ones that are most likely to cause death.
Washington resident Gabrielle Edwards tells WCBU's Joe Deacon that looking back on that day is a surreal experience.
Sometimes it feels like it just happened, and other times I can't believe it even happened at all.
What are your recollections from the day of the storm?
The day of the storm, my main memories are just that it seemed like any other day, but the weather was a little bit dreary. Everything seemed pretty normal otherwise, and then the weather suddenly turned so gross and foggy and rainy, and we were getting weather alerts on our weather radio, and so we pulled the cars into the garage because I didn't want them to be damaged by hail, and so we went to the basement, and everything changed at that point. So
tell us what kind of transpired, what it was like.
When the sirens went off, we quickly pulled the cars into the garage, thinking that we didn't want them to be damaged by hail. So we went into the storm shelter. At that time, it was just a storage room of the basement, and everything just changed. The winds got so loud. We could hear the siren, but then the winds overtook that. There were sounds that were just really unimaginable. And the wind was so hard that it was suctioning off parts of our house.
Paula Johnson was at work at Methodist Hospital in Peoria when the sky went black and tornado warnings began blaring. She was helping to move patients away from the windows when she heard a tornado had touched down near the intersections of Cummings Lane and Kruger Road in Washington. Here's what she told WCBU's Colin Shope.
And I said, oh, that's dangerously close to my house. I'm just going to go check my phone. And I started walking down the stairs. And then just something, I felt anxious and started walking faster and got to my phone. And I had a message from my husband, who also grew up in central Illinois and doesn't always take tornado warnings that seriously. So that was my concern was, if they had a warning, I hope that they got to the basement. And I had a message from him that said, sirens went off, kids and I spent a few minutes in the basement. And I was like, So I texted him back, you guys doing okay? Nothing. You doing okay? Nothing. And I called. With that time we had a landline, and I got this. It just kind of went, DDD, this line is not in service, or some message like that. And I kind of went, And so then I tried calling a good friend of mine who just lives a couple of blocks away. And she answered the phone. And the first thing she said is, it's gone. It's all gone. And I was like, what is gone? And she said, my house is gone and we can't find my dogs. And at this point, I'm panicking. She's panicking. She didn't remember I was at work. She thought I was calling to check on her. Anyway, it was kind of chaos and the call got cut off. And then it took about half an hour before I could reach my husband. So you kind of know where my brain was going in those minutes. But that's the part that is just really burned onto my brain.
And your family, they were all okay?
They were all okay, yeah. Yes.
Okay. And that's your husband, and you said you have a daughter? And
I have 4 children, actually.
Gotcha.
I have twin girls and then 2 boys.
Wow. So what about your house?
The house, it was funny when I finally reached my husband, and of course, first, you guys okay? He says, we're okay, I'm fine, the kids are fine. And he said, but sweetie, we can't live in our house anymore. And then the call got cut off.
Coming up next on All Things Peoria, Washington's mayor tells us how the city mobilized in the wake of the natural disaster and how the high school football team uplifted the community while also struggling with their own loss. You're listening to All Things Peoria. Thanks for listening to today's special episode of All Things Peoria on the 10th anniversary of a major central Illinois tornado outbreak on 89.9 FM and WCBU.org. I'm Jody Holtz. Washington Mayor Gary Meniere's house wasn't directly impacted by the 2013 tornado, but just 2 blocks away, it was devastation. He describes to WCBU's Colin Shope what it was like walking through the zone a couple days after the twister, as people were sifting through the debris for photos, jewelry, and other personal mementos.
We walked through, and I was actually on Hampton Road in Devonshire, and to the person, everybody that would, gave you a great hug, and I said, man, I feel so bad, and this is so sorry, and they said, Mayor, don't worry, we have each other, and it's just stuff. And I'm thinking, I heard that over and over again, and we talk about it's our stuff, but it's our life that has now gone, and all those memories are long gone, but they had each other, and that's what they hung on to. And the resilience of this community is just amazing because how quickly they began to rebuild. And we made sure that we heard from Joplin, Missouri. Mark Rohr, who wrote a book, told us on that Wednesday, we had a phone conference that Mayor Artis organized for me, and the first thing he kept saying is, you got to get rid of the debris. If the debris is in the way, you can't recover. And so we took that to heart, and obviously being a winter storm like we had, we knew winter was coming. Obviously that evening we had snow showers, sleet, rain, 56 inches of snow followed that winter. So we just continued to work hard to try to get that debris out of the way, and had plenty of help from all different agencies. It was fantastic.
Could you just talk a little bit about the challenge of trying to manage this recovery?
The amazing things for us was our public works and all the public works, the townships that came to our rescue, and the different surrounding communities, and Caterpillar supplying all kinds of equipment for us. I remember when Doug Oberhelman, the CEO of Caterpillar at the time, came to visit, and on the Friday afterwards, and he counted about 40 pieces of Caterpillar equipment, helping clean up the debris away from people's homes, and just trying to get things out of the way. But our FEMA only allows you 3 days to get the streets open, and that's all they're going to pay you for. And we chose to continue to do it all but Thanksgiving Day. We went about 38 straight days picking up debris. And if people got it to the curbside, whether it was a whole house, if their contractor could get the whole house, what was left of it, to the street, we took it.
Gabrielle Edwards told WCBU's Joe Deacon others stepped up to help them sort through the chaos.
I couldn't believe how many people would come and try to help us. We were just feeling confused and lost, and you don't even know where to begin when you lose everything you own. We didn't even have a meal or a toothbrush or shoes, quite honestly. We didn't have shoes on our feet. So it was amazing, the amount of people that came forward just to help us immediately. And moving forward, just friends and people that we didn't know, and organizations, they would donate things to us. They came and helped us sort of try to go through our pile of garbage in the yard to find pictures of our kids or just anything. It was amazing. It was really amazing how many people would be willing to help us.
Edwards says it was far from ideal trying to rebuild her home in November as winter moved in. But she says there was a sense of comfort in that many others were going through the same thing. The Washington Community High School football team also played a big role in the cleanup process as they were preparing for a semifinal game and players were dealing with their own losses. WCBU correspondent Steve Stein spoke to coach Daryl Crouch.
That was really therapeutic for our kids. One, to keep them busy, and two, they felt kind of guilty that they wanted to be involved in that. So we got them out a number of times and were able to go and help. And they were already that day, before we even started organizing them, there were kids that were in their neighborhood trying to help out, neighbors, elderly, just with trying to get them dug out a little bit so they could get out of their place even.
How many of your players lost their homes? Do you recall how many there were?
We were between 8 and 10.
Lost their homes completely, got destroyed, and some of your key players too, right?
Correct. Our starting quarterback,
Colton Marshall.
Colton Marshall, his was total gone. Brogan Brownfield, starting guard. Grant Uffreen was one of our freshman coaches at that time. His house was a total loss because that was one of the first places I went to, and then that same time period went and caught up with Colton at his house. It was just, again, not that far from mine, 2 blocks from my house that we were renting at that point.
Did your team get a chance to practice much of that week? Did you get in a full week of practice?
So we practiced. The thing that was toughest, Steve, was we didn't have power in a lot of places. Our kids didn't have a scouting report. The only time in my whole 37, 38-year career.
No scouting
report for them.
For Sacred Heart, Griffin. Yeah.
For a phenomenal team that you're going to play.
Yeah.
And we were fortunate because my connections with the college and Kurt Barth, he got us over to their place, so at least our coaches
Eureka College, right? So, yeah.
Could get on huddle and at least see what we were going to play and then try to verbalize it to our kids.
At the game, do you think after all the kids went through, and obviously they were fired up to play or represent the community and everything, but this had to be a draining week for them mentally, and then having to play a great team like that. So kind of good and bad for that, what had happened, right? So
super stressful, I'm sure, when you think of, here's your starting quarterback, he doesn't have a house right now. They can say it wasn't on their mind, but there's no way that it was.
Not for a 16 or 17 or 18-year-old,
totally
no.
Yeah. You're thinking about that. But that time we had, we talked as well, it was good for our town because they had time away from it where that, I'm sure nobody was thinking about the tornado or their house.
For a couple hours, yeah.
Yeah, for a good 3 to 4 hours that day.
Tell me, you said several schools helped out your team. Can you kind of list that and what they did for you, what you recall?
Yeah, it was amazing, right off the bat, the Middle Illini schools that reached out, trying to have some food and things for us at the Pantherplex for our kids when they were coming in. So that was fantastic. We had beat U-High in that quarterfinal game.
That was a game on that Saturday before the tornado was U-High?
Yeah, Saturday before the tornado. Tracy Patkunas, one of our friends we live back in Bloomington Normal area, had a son that was a U-High player. So the U-High moms took care of us for lunch a couple of those times. Joliet Catholic, who we had played in the playoffs, I think we probably played them 4 or 5 times. Their parents came down and fed us our team meal on, I think it would have been that Thursday night. Came down with some of their players, and that was super nice of them.
Just ahead, a look at the legacy of the Washington tornado 10 years on and into the future. You're listening to All Things Peoria. This is a special episode of All Things Peoria dedicated to the 10th anniversary of a deadly and destructive Central Illinois tornado outbreak. I'm Jody Holtz. The 2013 tornado wasn't the first to touch Washington, but it was the most destructive. John Stromberger is the archivist for the Washington Historical Society. He says they collected only a few artifacts from the 2013 tornado, but what they do have in spades are first-hand accounts. He tells WCBU's Tim Shelley those stories are important, too.
Well, if you don't have that, you lose the actual effect of the event. If you read about there was a tornado in 1896, you don't have any sort of perspective as to what that was. And so now you read a memoir about somebody who had to walk from the south end of town to their home in Devonshire because they weren't letting any cars in, and they didn't have any shoes and those things like that wouldn't come through in just a superficial history. Those are the things that we're keeping just so people can understand exactly what happened.
The motto, Washington Strong, was born out of the rubble of the tornado, and it still resonates with many Washingtonians today. Mayor Gary Menier tells WCBU's Colin Shope the words Washington Strong have power.
It's interesting because when Roger Holzhauer and I from Teamworks talked about they wanted to do something to give us some strength, and they talked about making some T-shirts, and he said, what about Washington Strong? And I think it just gives you a symbol of something to lean on, and it does make us strong. And the band Chicago, when they came to play in February, they talked about feeling stronger every day as one of their songs, and they kind of played off that. And actually, somebody threw a Washington Strong shirt to the drummer, and he put it on during the concert. And so I think it just symbolized something to give us hope and stronger each and every day. And now I think it's we're stronger for it, and I think we'll continue to use that Washington Strong slogan.
Do you remember if you could kind of estimate how long it took until you felt confident, we're kind of firmly on the path back to normal again. Weeks, months?
I don't think it'll ever be normal. That's kind of a tough thing to say. I think it was probably a couple years before I got to the comfort level that people were really going to stay and rebuild. But it's just amazing. I think there was only 5 lots that weren't rebuilt on. Most of those were purchased by their neighbors or split the property to make their yards a little bit bigger. So I always say maybe it's the type of community we were before the disaster that helped us get through it and help us to start a recovery.
Driving today through the Devonshire subdivision struck by the tornado, you'd be hard-pressed to tell a major natural disaster rolled through a decade ago. New builds and new trees replaced much of what was destroyed. But memories still endure. John Stromberger says the community spirit sculpture on the south side of 5 Points, Washington, is a physical symbol of the city's resilience. He says the Washington Strong phrase coined after the tornado also recognizes how people stepped up in times of need to help their neighbors and would do so again.
Washington's Washington, and you wouldn't have suspected that, because everybody kind of does their own thing when things are normal. Everybody, you say hi to your neighbors, and things like that. But when something disastrous happens, you're the first one running over there to see if they're okay. And I have no doubt that Washington would react the same way if something like that happened again.
For Paula Johnson, Washington Strong has a similar meaning. She says the community can set aside their differences and pull together when the going gets hard.
Things have gone back to normal, which is great. I mean, that's what we wanted, was for things to go back to normal. But yes, I 100% believe that if there were anything that happened, whether it was another tornado or some other, tough event. I mean, I've watched people with, health issues needing help from the community, and they pull together and support each other. So yeah, I absolutely believe it's still a thing.
And that is all for today's special episode of WCBU's All Things Peoria, marking the 10-year anniversary of the tornado that impacted Washington and Tazewell County. I'm Jody Holtz. Thanks so much for listening today. Our story help today came from the entire WCBU newsroom. That includes Tim Shelley, Cameron Cutinello, Joe Deacon, and Colin Shope, as well as WCBU correspondent Steve Stein. Holden Kellogg is our producer. For more information on this story today, head to WCBU.org and make sure you're subscribed to the All Things Peoria podcast on Apple, Spotify, Google, or the NPR app. And we want to know what you thought of the show today, so let us know by commenting on our Facebook page, We're Peoria Public Radio, or give us a follow on Instagram at WCBU Radio. This is 89.9 FM and WCBU.org, Peoria Public Radio, part of the NPR network.
WCBU's On Deck delivers everything you need to know to start your day. You'll hear Greater Peoria's biggest stories of the day, headlines, and today's public meetings and events, all in 7.5 minutes. Listen to On Deck from WCBU, part of the NPR network.